Archanadi, maybe you can start.
No, Rangata, I don't have the text today. I can't read.
And
So
Sunki,
please,
can you
Sumiti,
start?
you can read.
Yes, I will. Yes, I will read.
Okay, go ahead.
Chapter 10. Knowledge by identity and separative knowledge.
Okay.
They see the self. They see the self in the self by the self. Kita. Where there is duality, there other sees the other. Other hears, touches, thinks of, knows other. But when one sees all as the self, by what shall one know it? It is by the self that one knows all this that is. All betrays him who sees all elsewhere than in the self. For all this that is the Brahman. All beings and all this that is are this self. Brida Aranyaka Upanishad. The self-existent has pierced the doors of the sense outward. Therefore, one sees things outwardly and sees not in one's inner being. Rarely, a sage desiring immortality, his sight turned inwards, sees the self face to face. Katha Upanishad. There is no annihilation of the seeing of the seer, the speaking of the speaker, the hearing of the hearer, the knowing of the knower, for they are indestructible. But it is not a second or other than and separate from himself that he sees, speaks to, hears, knows. Brida Aranyaka Upanishad. Do I continue, Rangada?
Pardon?
Do I continue the paragraph?
No, because this is a very important quotations. So I'll have
Yes.
just brief discussion about this. Okay. So the chapter heading is knowledge by identity. So what does that mean? Knowledge by identity means you become what you want to know. Okay. Now suppose I am now want to know, let us say I want to know Sunki. I have to, my consciousness has to merge with her consciousness. Then her consciousness becomes my consciousness. So I know everything. That is knowledge by identity. But identity means how can two things become one? Okay, the two stones cannot merge into one another. But when you come to the life level, two glasses of water, okay, can merge into and become one. So already the oneness is becoming at this subtler level, it becomes so. But the capacity to do that has to be there. When you come to mind also, it is a very subtle substance. And one mind can merge into another. That also is possible. But the capacity to know that is only at the spiritual level of consciousness. Okay. So there are so many ways of seeing, but you have to identify. That is the highest level is you totally identify your consciousness with the divine, then you become the divine. That is what is being said here, and all these quotations are implications of that. So we'll have a quick look at these quotations because that is the whole chapter is based on this. What is separative knowledge and what is knowledge by identity? Separative knowledge is when I want to know Archana Devi, Shilpa, Kiran and Sunki, when I want to know them, I can't know them. I don't know your thoughts. I don't know your emotions. I don't know whether you are well or you have got a small physical problem. I don't know. So that is separative knowledge. So separative knowledge is you have to, there has to be expression and then I'll come to know something. From your expression, I can make out something, but there is ignorance. Separative knowledge is ignorance. Okay. So, but as you keep climbing higher and higher, I'll just briefly tell you there are 4 levels of knowledge. The first level of knowledge is separative, indirect knowledge. What is separative means? I am separate, you are separate. And indirect means I am using instruments to know you. The instruments are my senses. Okay, so this is the first level of knowledge. Separating knowledge, and they are indirect. I have to use my instruments. I have to use my eyes to see you. I have to use my ears to hear you. Okay, so this is separative knowledge. Now, when you go to the spiritual level of consciousness, you don't need to use your senses. So it becomes direct, but still it is separative. In other words, I can know your thoughts and I can know your emotions, but you are you and I am I. So that is separative, direct knowledge. Get the point? You are still there. You are separate from me, but I can see your thoughts and I can see your emotion. I can feel your emotions. So that is separative, direct knowledge. Then the last one is non-separative, direct knowledge. In other words, I become you entirely. So this is the identity, knowledge by identity. And I spoke of 4. So which is the third one? The third one is knowledge by identity, which is slightly degraded. Okay? There is still a feeling of separateness. That is the third one. So level 1, indirect separative knowledge. I think it's clear, no? The second one, when in the spiritual planes of consciousness, I have developed the capacity of seeing with my subtle eyes and hearing with my subtle ears. So I don't need to use my senses. I look at you and I know your thoughts and your feelings. There is direct but separative knowledge. You are still you. There is a difference between you and me. Then at the higher, as you keep going higher and higher, this difference between you and me also starts disappearing. And at the highest level, it becomes totally I become you. There is a cosmic consciousness where I am everything and everything is also in me. So this is what is being said. So at that time, if you are not using your mind and your senses, what are you using? You are using the capacity of the self. And what is a self? We have seen already before. It's a Brahman consciousness. You have entered into your soul. The soul has all these capacities. Okay? And that is what the Upanishads are saying. So can you know the Brahman by your senses and your mind? The answer very clearly is no. So how can you know the Brahman? By becoming the Brahman. That's the answer. Okay? So this is the basis on which this chapter is going to be described. All right? So then I'm reading the quotations one by one, then we'll see. They see the self in the self by the self. Okay? Atmanam Viddhi, Atmana, Atmani. In the self, by the self, you know the self. That's the Gita. Okay? Now, we come to the next one, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is a very important one, it's a huge one, very big one. Where there is duality, there other sees other. So the physical world, level 1, is all dualities. You are there separate, all of you are there separate. So there is dualities. So where there is duality, there other sees other. I am the first other, you are the other, second other. So other hears, touches, thinks of, knows other. Okay? So this is the separative knowledge, separative, indirect knowledge. But when one sees all as the self, that is when you go to the Brahman consciousness, the self, by what shall one know it? So what are the instruments of knowledge that you are using there? It is by the self that one knows all this that is. The self has got the capacity of using the subtlest of senses. It doesn't need to use gross senses. Okay? So he is asking a question very clearly. By what shall one know it? It is by the self that one knows all this that is. Everything you come to know. All betrays him who sees all elsewhere than in the self. So if you are at level 1, you see other sees other, hears others. So that is a betrayal. In other words, it's not the real knowledge. You are being fooled. The whole universe is one. But if you are seeing separateness, you are not in knowledge, you are in ignorance. That is what is being said. All betrays him who sees all elsewhere than in the self. Separateness. For all this that is, is the Brahman. Everything is the Brahman. All beings and all this that is are this self. There is nothing else except Brahman. Brahman is everything, the Alpha and the Omega. Brahman is there in the transcendental level, it's there in the cosmic level, it is also there in the individual. So you must develop the capacity to see the Brahman everywhere. And for that you need subtle sight. Okay? I am reading the next one, the Katha Upanishad. The self-existent, who is the self-existent? The Brahman. He exists by himself. For instance, we don't exist by ourselves. We exist because of our body, mind, life, which has been created by nature. So nature has created us, our body, mind, life. But when you realize yourself, you realize that it is self-existent. It doesn't need nature to create you. Your soul has been created right from the beginning. It is a divine creation. The self-existent has pierced the doors of sense outward. So when you are in the self, you don't need the doors of outward sense. Okay? But the inner sense is developed. Therefore, one sees things outwardly and sees not in one's inner being. Okay? Inner being is your thoughts and your emotions. They are inner. I don't see them. Rarely a sage, desiring immortality, his sight turned inward, sees the self face to face. So if you want to know, you have to plunge into yourself with different methods. Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga. Then you can experience the self. Then you don't need the physical senses. The third one, there is no annihilation of the seeing of the seer. In other words, the subtle sight is immortal. That's what he's saying. Okay? The speaking of the speaker, the hearing of the hearer. The hearer is mortal, but the hearing of the hearer is not mortal. It is, all the senses are there at the highest level, but they are all subtle. The knowing of the knower, for they are indestructible, they are eternal. But it is not a second or other than, or separate from himself, that he sees, speaks to, hears and knows. So when you are in the cosmic consciousness, you are seeing and speaking to yourself. You are speaking to somebody else, but you are speaking to, mother may be speaking to so many people, but she is speaking to herself because she sees herself in everybody. That is what is being said. Right. Now we can read the, so this is the, remember the 4 stages of knowledge. Our normal condition using senses, we are seeing indirect separative knowledge. Right? I'm repeating. Because indirect, because this between me and you, the senses are coming in. If the senses are not there, I don't know you. Therefore, it is indirect through the senses. At the second level, you don't need the senses. So it is direct, but still it is separative. You are you and I am I. Okay. At the third level, or actually the fourth, they totally, you also become I. I become you. I become the whole universe. That is knowledge by identity. And the third one is a slightly diminished form of the last and third one, last and fourth one. Right. Now we can read the first paragraph. So, yeah, you can read now. Our surface cognition.
Our surface cognition, our limited and restricted mental way of looking at ourselves, at our inner movements, and at the world outside us, and its objects and happenings, is so constituted that it derives in different degrees from a fourfold order of knowledge. The original and fundamental way of knowing, native to the occult self in things, is a knowledge by identity. The second derivative is a knowledge by direct contact associated at its roots with a secret knowledge by identity or starting from it, but actually separated from its source and therefore powerful but incomplete in its cognition. The third is a knowledge by separation from the object of observation. but still with a direct contact as its support or even a partial identity. The fourth is a completely separative knowledge, which relies on a machinery of indirect contact, a knowledge by acquisition, which is yet, without being conscious of it, a rendering or bringing up of the contents of a pre-existent inner awareness and knowledge. A knowledge by identity, a knowledge by intimate direct contact, a knowledge by separative direct contact, a wholly separative knowledge by indirect contact are the four cognitive methods of nature.
There you are. What we have discussed only he is saying. But I went from the bottom to the top. He is going from the top to the bottom. Okay. So let us see his words so that we can understand what he is saying. Our surface cognition. Surface cognition are the senses. Cognition means knowledge. Our knowledge is coming through our senses. If our senses are not there, we can never know the outside world. So cognition, knowledge, recognition. Okay. Cognition is the noun for knowing something. Okay? It's a process of knowledge. So our surface knowledge, okay, our limited and restricted mental way of looking at ourselves. He is now saying mental way because these senses can't see by themselves. They have to get interpreted by the brain. And that is why it's all finally it is mental. And that's why they say that five senses are there. But by left to themselves, they will not be able to know anything. So the brain is the sixth and real sense, the manas. And to connect the two, the senses and the manas, there are nerves, physical nerves, which carry the currents, which carry the electrical impulses and go to the brain. And the brain is again telling you what you're seeing and hearing and sending it back to your mind. This is what is being said. So our surface conscious cognition, our limited and restricted mental way of looking at ourselves, at our inner movements, and at the world outside. Because even when you're looking into yourself, oh, yesterday I was angry, today I'm very happy. So all this you're looking into yourself. So looking at ourselves, at our inner movements, and at the world outside us, and its objects and happenings, is so constituted that it derives in different degrees from a fourfold order of knowledge. So the original and fundamental way of knowing, native to the occult self in things, is a knowledge by identity. You become what you want to know. He is starting from the top. The second, derivative. That's why I said it's a degradation of the highest one. It's a derivative. It is derived from. Okay? Is a knowledge by direct contact, okay, associated at its roots with a secret knowledge by identity and starting from it, but actually separated from its source and therefore powerful but incomplete in its cognition. So the overmind consciousness would be something like that. Okay, it's a very powerful method. You can have direct identity also, but it is not complete. That's what simply saying. That's the second one. But still, with a direct contact as its support, and even a partial identity. So partial identity is the second one from the top. The third is a knowledge by separation from the object of observation, but still with a direct contact as its support, and even a partial identity. This is the third one. Direct contact, that means you don't need the senses, the third one. The fourth is a completely separated knowledge which relies on a machinery of indirect contact. Machinery of indirect contact is the senses. One word, your senses is a machinery of indirect contact. A knowledge by acquisition. You have to acquire knowledge, not know by itself. This is acquired. And knowledge by acquisition, which is yet, without being conscious of it, a rendering and bringing up of the contents of a pre-existent inner awareness and knowledge. So even our separative knowledge is a degraded form of the ultimate knowledge. That's what he's saying. In fact, we must remember now that always there's a gradation. Everything that you can think of is in seed form at the highest level and it's in purest form. But when it keeps coming down, it gets degraded, diminished, and even distorted. That's what he's saying. And knowledge by identity, he's summing up. The last sentence is a summing up. And knowledge by identity, number 1. And knowledge by intimate direct contact, number 2. And knowledge by separative direct contact, number 3. A wholly separative knowledge by indirect contact, number 4, are the 4 cognitive methods of nature. So remember this, okay? Now we will discuss this whole question. I think it is quite clear, no? Okay? So now, Shilpa, you can read maybe?
Yes. Shall I read?
Yeah, go ahead. The second paragraph. The first, we have got
The first way of knowing in its purest form is illustrated in the surface mind only by our direct awareness of our own essential existence. It is a knowledge empty of any other content than the pure fact of self and being, of nothing else in the world as our surface mind, the same kind of awareness. But in the knowledge of the structure and movements of our subjective consciousness, some element of awareness by identity does enter, for we cannot protect ourselves with a certain identification into these movements. It has already been noted how this can happen in the case of an unrush of wrath which swallows us up, so that for the moment of our whole consciousness seems to be a wave of anger, other passions, love, grief, joy, have the same power to seize and occupy us. Thought has also absorbed and occupies. We lose sight of the thinker and become the thought and the thinking. But very ordinarily, there is a double moment. A part of ourselves becomes the thought or the passion. Another part of us either accompanies it with a certain adherence or follows it closely and knows it by an intimate indirect contact, which falls short of identification or entire self-oblivion in the moment.
Then they're describing the lowest one. He's describing how it is based on separateness. So I can do one thing. I can read the summary. Okay? The first way of knowing can best be illustrated so that you can understand. He's saying the first way of knowing. No, sorry, this is the highest one. The first way of knowing can best be illustrated, although defectively, by our own awareness of our own thoughts and emotions. It is inside me, and I know my emotions and thoughts, not perfectly. He explains that afterwards. But this is a glimpse of what is identification, knowledge by identification. Okay, that means to say, yes, I know that I am angry. It is I who am angry. It is not somebody else who is angry. I know that I am angry. So you are identifying yourself with your emotions. So first, this is a very rough way of explaining what is the knowledge by identity. He's giving an example. So it can best be illustrated, although defectively, by our own awareness of our own thoughts and emotions. Of nothing else in the world are we aware in the same manner as we know ourselves. We become anger when it overpowers us. This power also remains. This power also is applicable to love, grief, and joy. We become love, grief, and joy. In other words, the identification is not complete. I am not able to remain constantly identified with myself. I move away from myself and become love. I become anger. I become grief and joy. So it is not perfect identification. That's what's in the particle. This power also obtains with love, grief, and joy. But the identification is not complete. There is a separation between the knower and the known. Part of us become anger, and a small part stands back. Identification is not complete. That's what he's saying for this paragraph. So, what is the time? 31. Maybe we can read one more paragraph. Archana, they couldn't read today. So, Kiran, maybe you can read.
Yes,
Okay, this identification.
yes. This identification is possible. Also, this simultaneous separation and partial identification, because these things are becomings of our being, determinations of our mind stuff, and mind energy, of our life stuff and life energy. But since they are only a small part of us, we are not bound to be identified and occupied. We can detach ourselves, separate the being from its temporary becoming, observe it, control it, sanction or prevent its manifestation. We can, in this way, by an inner detachment, a mental or spiritual separateness, partially or even fundamentally, liberate ourselves from the control of mind nature or vital nature over the being and assume the position of the witness, knower, and ruler. Thus, we have a double knowledge of the subjective movement. There is an intimate knowledge by identity of its stuff and its force of action, more intimate than we could have by any entirely separative and objective knowledge, such as we get of things outside us, things that are to us altogether not self. There is at the same time a knowledge by detached observation, detached by with a power of direct contact, which frees us from engrossment by the nature energy and enables us to relate the movement to the rest of our existence, our own existence, and world existence. If we are without this detachment, we lose our self of being and mastering knowledge in the nature self of becoming and movement and action. And though we know intimately the movement, we do not know it dominatingly and fully. This would not be the case if we carried into our identification with the movement, our identity with the rest of our subjective existence. If, that is to say, we could plunge wholly into the wave of becoming and at the same time be in the very absorption of the state or act, the mental witness, observer, controller. But this we cannot easily do because we live in a divided consciousness in which the vital part of us, our life nature of force and desire and passion and action, tends to control or swallow up the mind, and the mind has to avoid this subjection and control the vital, but can only succeed in the effort by keeping itself separate. For if it identifies itself, it is lost and hurried away in the life movement. Nevertheless, a kind of balanced double identity by division is possible, though it is not easy to keep the balance. There is a self of thought which observes and permits the passion for the sake of the experience, or is obliged by some life straits to permit it. And there is a self of life which allows itself to be carried along in the movement of nature. Here, then, in our subjective experience, we have field of the action of consciousness in which three movements of cognition can meet together: a certain kind of knowledge by identity, a knowledge by direct contact, and independent upon them, a separative knowledge.
Okay. So this is quite a big para and there's a lot to be discussed. So we can't do it today because if we start now, we will not be able to finish it. So next time we will discuss this paragraph in detail. So we have to reread in thought separation of the thinker and thinking. So This is what we will take up next time. So the page is 546. Okay, you have to do the needful.
Yes. In CWSA,
Ah. Yes.
the page is 544.
544.
44.
Oh, 544.
Yes, yes.
1 minute. Maybe I made a mistake. Yeah. So okay, 544. Yes, yes, you are right. You are absolutely right. It starts from 544. You are absolutely right. My
Yes, yes.
jumps sometimes. So this identification here starts from. Okay. Au revoir, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rangada.
Thank you, Rangana.